To study, to listen to understand, to comprehend, to make sense of the ultimate teaching that exists in this world, that is hidden from time to time, but thanks to those selfless individuals who sacrifice all pleasures, their well-being and their safety for the betterment of every living, sentient being in samsara, These are the Samaras and Buddhas that I speak of. Thanks to them, that Dhamma that gets given from time to time resurfaces. And so today we have with us another opportunity to listen to another dispensation of the Lord Buddha's teaching, the Lord Buddha's Dhamma. So it's vital, it's imperative that every time we do so, we take a moment to reflect, acknowledge, and accept the fact that it is because of Him that we have this Dhamma. It is thanks to His selflessness that we have this Dhamma. So before we commence, let us all pay homage to the Lord Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Also, before we commence, let us take a moment to invite the Vedas, Brahmins, spirits, demons, and men. Anyone we may have come past in samsara, anyone who might have helped and supported us, give some assistance to us, be that by offering us a glass of water or perhaps when we were lost, guide us, show us the way. It is thanks to them today, perhaps we will be more human. It is thanks to them today, perhaps we have this opportunity to listen to the Dhamma and to redeem ourselves from the suffering of samsara. So it is now our duty, our responsibility to extend this opportunity to them, and therefore, as I now recite the stanza, to invite all those sentient beings, I request you to extend that invitation out in your hearts and your minds. You will not know them today by the name, shape or form, but the mere feeling is sufficient. So anyone who might have been a mother or a father, some kind of relation, relative to you in this endless journey in samsara, this timeless journey in samsara, let us invite all of them to come along, to take part, to rejoice in this nature-raised being, and to listen to this Dhamma sermon, as well as all the Vedas and the Brahmins and anyone who is looking to rejoice in the merits of good deeds, as well as those who are seeking the Dhamma that moves us all towards true liberation. Let us invite all of them to join us and listen to this Dhamma sermon. Santa Chakrikalayasu Anta Gachantu Devata Sadhamam Virajasansa Sunantu Saggamukkadan Dhamma Savalpalo Ayam Badhanta Dhamma Savalpalo Ayam Badhanta Dhamma Savalpalo Ayam Badhanta. Most of the members of the Mahasangha, chief common monk of this Siri Alan Mathiniyaramaya historical temple, as well as all the other resident monks, and all of you who are gathered here to listen to this sermon today. Before we commence, let us all take a moment to accept and acknowledge once again that although today our lives have changed beyond human recognition, to what we used to be like, to what our lives used to be like, thanks to the gift of Dhamma. In this timeless journey in samsara, we have not always had this luxury, we have not always had the privilege of the Dhamma. And when that was the case, and our association was limited and restricted to ignoble people, immoral people, when it was with them we sought our solace, oftentimes virtually almost all the time, even when we might have come across someone who does this, Bhakti could do this, the other could do this, Anagamis, Sakudagamis, and Sotagamis, either part or having attained fruits. We may have offended them, insulted them, and abused them, slandered them. Either knowingly or unknowingly, any harm, any ill which we might have directed towards them. Today, think of our progress in Dhamma, on the path of Dhamma. So before we commence, let's take a moment to seek their forgiveness. And finally, before we commence the sermon, there is all make a firm resolve. May this Dhamma sermon help us all be able to unlock the barriers, overcome the obstacles which may be in our path to attaining the noble achievement of Sotapanna, the noble attainment of Sotapanna. With that firm resolve in mind, let us all be prepared to listen to the sermon. Once again, some excellent questions. It's great to see this kind of questions coming through, because it really shows that, this is not just a nice way to spend a Sunday afternoon. We're thinking about the things we speak about. And this journey doesn't stop when you leave the temple. It continues with you. You think about it, you reflect on what we speak about. And use your homes as your labs, your workplaces as your labs, your schools as your labs, to apply the theory that we discuss and we learn when we come here. So that's absolutely fantastic. Well done. So, before I get to the questions, as I'm sure you know by now, we are now behind schedule, and this is because we had an ordination ceremony where six young children entered the Buddhist ministry, some from Shasani, and they are monks with us. So I was attending that ceremony, and it's because of that, with the rains, and although I had planned to be here by 2 o'clock afternoon, we didn't quite know that, so apologies for the delay. God Swami said, with the eradication of Sakkaya Vritti, the belief that nothing in this world prevails to my liking, will go away. The belief that nothing in this world prevails to my liking will go away. Okay? In that case, how can Visakha found it difficult to bear the loss of her grandchild at a later stage? Please explain. I think the second question is related, so I'll really cover at the same time, we can cover them together. Though Ramananda Sakya attained the Sotapanna Marga, constantly he was finding it difficult to control his anger with his fellow workers. What is the assurance that this sort of a bad karma will not touch?
That there's a problem. It's understanding what the real problem is. It's understanding what the real cause of the problem is. It's an understanding of what it is that we need to do to eradicate that problem. And it's an understanding of the steps that are involved in eradicating the cause for the problem. So it's an understanding. You've understood how to do something. You haven't started doing it yet. Understanding how to do something is not the same as having started to do it or having done it. They're not the same. And I think that'll make sense to you. It's quite obvious. You know, when you passed with your driver's license, now you know how to drive a car, but you haven't driven one on your own yet. But you can drive a car on your own now because you're a qualified driver. You've got a license and you can drive by yourself. You don't need another adult sat next to you, guiding you, so on and so forth. You don't now any longer need a teacher. You can drive your own car. So this car that we are driving towards Nibbana, you no longer need an instructor once you become a Sotapanna. But remember, you've only just started your car. You haven't engaged gear yet. You haven't released the handbrake yet. You haven't put your foot on the pedal yet. The moment you start doing that, you're now on the path to becoming a Sakurdagami. So, see, once you become a Sotapanna, now you have the right view, Sammaditthi. Remember, I think last week and perhaps a week before I explained, right view doesn't quite cut it when we talk about Sammaditthi, but I've gone over it several times, so I'm not going to be an old record. Sound like an old record, right? So you know what I mean by that. Sammaditthi is not necessarily right view. It doesn't quite convey the full meaning. But this is the view that helps us understand what exactly the problem is. What the real problem is. Because half the time we are solving the wrong problem. You see, as we were traveling here from where the ceremony was held today, I was sat down next to our young novice monks, and I asked them to look outside as we were driving past the cities and the towns, and look and observe the people that you see. There are people engaged in various activities, various enterprises. There are shopkeepers, there are laborers, there are doctors, all sorts of people. People engaged in various different activities. There are farmers in the paddy fields. Now, I asked them, I told them, observe how people are prepared to do virtually anything to release themselves from suffering. Temporarily. Not permanently, temporarily. You know, think about a farmer that walks into the paddy field. This is his living. He's prepared to get himself into mud, have mud all over his body, work with the cows on the farm, you know, while it's hot outside in the hot sun. He spends an entire day working in the farm, and then he comes back home. Why is he prepared to do that? To relieve himself from suffering. Then think about a boxer who gets into a boxing ring. What's he doing? He's prepared to receive punches from other people. Punches that can sometimes break his ribs. Punches that can leave a black eye. Punches that could sometimes crack his skull. All for what? To relieve himself from suffering. Really? You're prepared to go through that to relieve yourself from suffering? Now think about, there'll be mothers here. You went through 9-10 months of labor. You went through childbirth. Not once, not twice, some of you many times over. To relieve yourself from suffering. You went through suffering to relieve yourself from suffering. Look at what we're prepared to put ourselves through. All in the hope of trying to relieve ourselves from suffering. But all of this is temporary relief from suffering. Because we haven't understood the problem yet. We are treating the wrong problem. Because once you've identified the true problem, once you've identified the real problem, whenever that view, whenever that understanding is with you and you're open to it and you can see it clearly, when you're not blinded, then to relieve yourself from suffering, to redeem yourself, not rather relieve, redeem yourself from suffering. I think that's probably the best way to distinguish these two. You can either relieve yourself from suffering or you can redeem yourself from suffering. Because when you relieve yourself from suffering, remember what we talked about last week, how people are prepared to put them through this endless cycle of suffering. Why? Because it's only for as long as suffering exists. You can enjoy the pleasure that you receive, that you can experience by relieving yourself from it. Last week I gave you again the example of, there's a rash on your arm. I keep coming back to it because, it's quite an experience that we've all had at some point in our life. See, which of these three things is pleasurable? You tell me. One, you have a rash on your arm and it's itchy. You haven't started scratching it yet. It's itchy. You're feeling the need to itch. That's stage one. Stage two, you're itching yourself. You're scratching yourself. You're involved in the physical action of scratching yourself. Stage three, you've completed that process. You've finished scratching yourself. Which of these three is pleasurable? Is it the first? Is it the third? It's the second. The second is what is pleasurable. Relieving yourself from suffering is what's pleasurable. And therefore the summary of last week's sermon was, all beings, all sentient beings, because we're attached to that pleasure, we're attached to the experience of that pleasure, what we do is we go looking for suffering. We go looking for pain. Do you like pain? Don't lie. You love pain. No, why not? Yes. Because if you didn't have pain, how could you relieve yourself from pain and therefore enjoy the pleasure of relief? If you never felt hunger, how could you experience the relief from hunger? Because that's what you like so much. That's what we attach ourselves to. If you didn't have the rash on your arm, how could you enjoy the relief while you scratch away on the rash? Because it's not feeling the itch that's pleasurable. Once you finish scratching, that's not when it's pleasurable. In fact, most of the time it's quite painful after that. And then you ask yourself, why did I put myself through it? What's pleasurable is going through that experience of scratching away. That's what's pleasurable. So don't tell me you don't love pain. Because you have to have the pain to relieve yourself from pain, and therefore then you experience pleasure. It's relief from pain that always brings us pleasure. Nothing else. So I was explaining to there's novice monks who were sat next to me, look at all these people. Isn't it pain that makes the world go round? Why is this farmer in the paddy field? Because he experiences pain, he experiences agony, anxiety. And in the need to relieve himself from that, be that physical or mental. How is it physical? Well, he needs the shelter. He feels hunger. And if he's ill, he needs to earn some money so he can go to the doctor. But what about the mental agonies, the mental frustrations, the mental suffering. If he wants to look at sites that he likes, let's say he wants to go watch a movie, well, still he needs money. So to earn some money, he's going to have to go and work in the paddy field. To eat at a Chinese, he's going to need some money. So to do that, he's going to have to go and work at the paddy field. So now, why is he going through that suffering? So he can earn the resources that is required to help relieve himself from suffering. But none of those is going to redeem himself from suffering, redeem him from suffering. All of that is involved in the process of relief from suffering, which is always temporary. Relieve yourself from suffering. As soon as you've relieved yourself from one suffering, if you need to enjoy pleasure again, you have to go looking for another source of pain. And in fact, this is why people don't like to attain Nibbana. You propose, hey, would you all like to attain Nibbana? People go, yeah. Alright, let's all go then to the monastery. Let's all go to the temple. I'll ordain you all, and then you can start the process of quite rapidly going towards the process, quite rapidly putting yourself through the process of attaining Nibbana. But no, people are not prepared to do that. I'm not talking about those of you who have duties and responsibilities, but I'm talking about, people who cannot break this connection with pain, because there has to be pain for them to enjoy gain. Pleasure doesn't come any other way. You have to have pain so you can relieve yourself from pain, and then you can enjoy pleasure. So when I propose, I've got a way to redeem yourself from pain once and for all. Oh no, I'm not prepared to do that. Because as soon as that happens, what's gonna happen then? How can I enjoy pleasure after that? I've had people come to me and say, Swami Nuhansa, you talk about Nibbana. Where is Nibbana? I said, it's not a place, it's not a planet that you can go to and live on. It's where you stop all kinds of existence. And then usually the question that comes immediately afterwards is, well, hang on, if I enter that kind of state where I'm no longer in existence, how can I enjoy the pleasure that I do right now? All this food that give me pleasure, all these sights that give me pleasure. What, you're saying I have to leave my wife? The movies that I watch that bring me pleasure, the music that I listen to that bring me pleasure, I've got to let go of all of that? I say, well, it's going to happen when you get to Nibbana. I'm not prepared to do that then. Immediately you take a step back. I'm not prepared to do that. What are they really saying they're not prepared to do? Let go of pain. Because as soon as you let go of pain, you've let go of the source of pleasure. No pain, no gain. This is what we talked about last week. So, becoming a Sotapanna is coming to the right view, is coming to the right understanding. It's coming to Sammaditthi, where now you understand what is the true problem, what is the real problem. It's not, it is pain, yes, we all get that. But the pain that someone who's not a Sotapanna tries to solve is the pain that comes as a vipaka. Remember we talked about the rat, which class the rat needs to take? Is it the class to avoid the cage, or is it the trap, or the class to avoid the bait? And we all agreed it was the second. See, once you become an Arya, once you become a noble person, once you become a Sotapanna, you'll see that the problem lies with the bait. The problem's not with the trap. The problem's not in experiencing hunger. That's not where the problem is. Hunger is a problem. It's a worldwide problem. It's a global problem. Yes, we're all trying to tackle hunger. We're all trying to tackle climate change. Right? These are all global problems, but they're all coming to us as vipakas of the karmas that we've done in the past. But why did we do the karmas? We did those karmas because we were attached to certain things. The bait we were attached to. So the real problem lies in the attachment to the bait. That's the problem we are now trying to solve. So when Vishaka, at the age of 7, became a Sotapanna, she realized where the real problem lies. She came to Sammaditthi. She put her step on the Noble Eightfold Path. She entered the Noble Eightfold Path, the path that leads her to Nibbana. And now she understands what the real problem is. However, there's always a however, isn't it? There's always a but. This right view that a Sotapanna has, and I think I might have touched on this in a previous sermon, if I vaguely remember of that. But that's okay, you can keep coming back with questions until it sinks with you. Until the penny drops. This understanding of a Sotapanna is very much like, I'll give you an analogy. It's like you can see everything when there's a bright moon on a dark night. Imagine a dark night, not the Dark Knight and Batman, just a normal dark night, okay? There's no light, it's just dark. So you walk outside into your garden and it's dark, there's no moon, and there's no artificial lighting. So you can't see where you're going, you can't see where you're stepping. You don't know if what you're going to touch could hurt you, could harm you. You don't know where you're going to be treading could hurt you, could harm you. So you have no idea. You're literally blind. Well, virtually blind, not literally, but you're virtually blind because you don't know where you're going because there's no light. You're in darkness. For as long as this is the case, you could do things that could hurt you and you could do things that could hurt other people. But when let's say there is a bright moon, there's a full moon in fact, but it's covered by clouds. And the clouds move away and it reveals the full moon. Now this moon is free to shed its light in all its glory. And when this light is shed, and now this light falls all over the place, now you can see where you're going. Now you can see what you're touching. Now you can see where you're going to be sitting. Now you can be careful, you can tread carefully. Now you can make deliberate choices. Do I step forward or do I not? Because you know where you're going to be stepping. Why? Because the moon's now shedding its light. It's free to shed its light. But again, the clouds cover the moon. And again, it's darkness. The understanding of a Sotapanna is just like that. The understanding of a Sotapanna is like a dark night where there's a bright moon, there's a full moon, but it's been covered with clouds from time to time. When the clouds move away and it's in full brightness, there's light all over the place, now the Sotapanna knows exactly right from wrong. He or she can tell if this is going to cause me suffering or not. If where I'm going to be treading next, if what I'm going to be touching is going to cause me harm and others harm. But when the clouds come and cover, they take over. These are the nivaranas, the hindrances. When the nivaranas take over, the hindrances take over, now that right view is hidden. It's hidden away. The light is hidden. Now once again you're in darkness. But you saw it for the first time. You saw what you saw when first the moon was revealed. And you could see it to some distance. But when the clouds have covered it again, now you are prepared to go and touch things and sit in places where you shouldn't be. You go and tread where you shouldn't be treading. These things can happen. This is why a Sotapanna can commit the 10 unwholesome deeds. It's possible that a Sotapanna commits the 10 unwholesome deeds, the Dasakusa. Only an Arahatun Mahanse, only an Arahant does not commit the unwholesome deeds. Punya Papa Pahinasa. That is the nature of an Arahant, but not the nature of a Sotapanna. It's not the nature of a Sakurdagami. That is not the nature of an Anagami even. It's the nature of an Arahant. It's only an arhat that does not, absolutely not, commit unwholesome deeds. But remember, a Sotapanna, and we're talking about Vishaka, who was a Sotapanna when she went on to have children. And also this question is about why was it difficult, why she found it difficult to bear the loss of her grandchild. Yes, she wept. And that's when she went to visit the Buddha. She went to visit the Buddha, and the Buddha asks her, why are you here at this ungodly hour? With wet hair? What's the problem? Why are you sad? Why are you upset? Why are you upset? And she says, I've lost my grandson. I've lost my grandchild. And knowing the Buddha, he always asks a very pertinent question. He says, well, Vishaka, wouldn't you like for all the children in this kingdom to be your grandchildren? And she says, yes, I'd love for that to be the case. She doesn't think about what she's saying. Why? Because the clouds have covered the moon. She can't bear the loss of her grandchild. Why? Because as soon as that happens, the clouds have covered the moon. She's not able to see right from wrong at that point in time. And perhaps to relieve herself from suffering, it could have been entirely possible that she could have committed an unwholesome deed. It's possible. Why? A Sotapanna can commit unwholesome deeds. However, the point we need to understand is not all unwholesome deeds lead you to the hells. It's the degree with which you apply yourself. The gravity of the unwholesome deeds is what determines whether it becomes a karma or a karma pata. It's a karma pata, or a deed path would be the literal translation, but I don't think that really conveys the meaning, so I'll use the word karma pata. It's a karma pata which can give you rebirth. So just because you commit an unwholesome deed doesn't mean that's going to give you it's going to give you rebirth in the four hells. Just because you've done a good deed doesn't mean it's going to give you rebirth in the blissful plane. It has to be a karma pata. And for each wholesome deed and for each unwholesome deed, there are a number of factors that need to fulfill. I'll give you an example. Let's say we're talking about killing, taking the life of a being, another being. Okay? So there are a number of factors that need to be fulfilled for this deed to become a deed path, or if this karma to become a karma pata. First, there has to be a being that is alive. You could think you're killing somebody. Let's say you're an archer. You've got your bow and arrow and you shoot an arrow at what you think is a deer. You have full intention to kill this animal, and you shoot the arrow, but it hits this deer and it just falls at its feet, and then you realize, actually that's an artificial deer. It wasn't a real one after all. Now, yes, there was a chetana, there was volition. Chetanaham bhikkhave kammang vadami. There was volition to kill the being. So with every moment that you went through this thought process where the volition to kill existed, you're going to have vipaka. There's going to be consequences for each of those thoughts. All the billions of thoughts that followed, there's going to be vipakas. But it's not going to become a karma pata. That bad deed that you committed does not bring you rebirth in the woeful plane, because one of the factors that needed to be present for that to become a deed path was not existent. And that was, it has to be an alive being. It has to be a real being, a live being. And that was just an artificial object. So you clearly couldn't have killed the animal, because there was no animal there in the first place. It was just a dummy. So therefore, but all those chittas, right? Picking your bow up, hunting for an animal, looking where it is, and then finding the right opportunity, none of these are wholesome deeds. None of the thoughts that you have at that point, throughout the process are wholesome. They're all unwholesome. Because what are you thinking? I want to kill an animal today. I'm going to take it home and feed my whatever, right? These are all unwholesome deeds, and with each of those thoughts, you're going to have to suffer the consequences. But because it doesn't become a karma pata, it's not going to bring you rebirth in the unwholesome, in the woeful plane, in the apayas. So so that's one of the factors. Second factor, you have to have used some kind of method to kill the animal. You have to have used a method to kill the animal. So there's a live deer, you have intention, but a method has not been used. You know how sometimes you come across some people that really annoy you, and you say, if only I could. If only I didn't have to end up in prison. I know what I'm going to do to you. But you don't implement that. You don't go ahead and execute the plan. So a method has not been used, and therefore harm has not been done to whom? To the other person. But to you? Oh yeah. Harm's been done already. Why? The thought? Thoughts of harm? All of these are chetana. So chetana ham bhikkave kammang vadami. It has to bring you karma. You know, the karmas are committed, and therefore vipakas are coming. But killing has not happened, or murder has not happened. Sometimes, let's say you set a trap. You set a trap for an animal, and the animal walks towards the trap, but it hears a noise and it runs away. So although the trap has been set and you have intention, the animal doesn't die. But let's say the animal falls into the trap, and actually the trap was set to kill the animal, but what happens is the animal falls into the trap, but it only breaks a leg. It doesn't actually kill the animal. I mean, you see, think about this, right? When we speak of the unwholesome deeds, the first is panatipata, killing. Well, what about breaking the leg of a being? Is that not an unwholesome deed? Well, clearly, I mean, otherwise you could do all kinds of harm to all people, and you say, that wasn't an unwholesome deed. I didn't kill the damn thing. I chopped its arms off, I chopped its legs off, but I didn't kill it. It doesn't work like that. It's that all of that is unwholesome. Absolutely. There's no question about that. But what doesn't happen is, because you haven't killed the animal, then it's not a karma pata. So sometimes the trap's been set, but the animal doesn't die. But sometimes you don't have the volition to do it. Think about right now. Aren't you killing? Aren't you killing right now? Stop breathing otherwise. If you don't want to kill living beings, stop breathing. With every breath you take, how many microorganisms do you think die? How many millions of microorganisms? When you go to the shower and you spend an hour in the shower, how many microorganisms do you think die as you do that? You may apply soap on your body, all these microorganisms that feed on your skin. But you have no volition. There's no chetana to kill those beings. And that is why there's no karma there. And there's no karma pata there anyway, because there's no karma, no karma pata. Okay? So likewise, there are a number of factors that need to be involved for a deed to become a deed path, or for a karma to become a karma pata. Now, so where I was going with that is, when you become a sotapanna, whilst unwholesome deeds can happen either through mind, speech or body, the factors that are required for you to be born in the woeful plane are non-existent after that point forward, from that point forward. Because if you remember last week I said there are 10 unwholesome thoughts, 10 unwholesome chittas. If you studied Abhidhamma to some extent, you'll know this. And there are 4 which are based in wrong view. And it's these 4 chittas that are responsible for bringing birth or patisandhi in the woeful plane, in the apayas. But as soon as you enter right view. As soon as Samma Ditti, as soon as you are gifted with Samma Ditti, as soon as you achieve Samma Ditti, then Miccha Ditti goes away. Wrong view goes away. And therefore, those thoughts cannot bring you birth in the unwholesome plane, sorry, in the woeful plane. So why was it difficult for Vishaka to bear the pain of the loss of her grandchildren? It's because at that moment of grief, the clouds covered the moon. She was not able to realize on the fact, and contemplate on the truth. At the back of her mind, she knows. She knows so much that she will never commit an unwholesome deed with such gravity that will take her to the woeful plane. Because that is why, you've heard the phrase Dhammo have rakkati dhammachari. The Dhamma protects those who behave, conduct themselves in the Dhamma. So as soon as a Sotapanna proceeds to commit an unwholesome deed, at the point where it manifests itself, where the next thing you do is going to take you to, a woeful plane, the clouds uncover the moon. The clouds reveal the moon. And Sammaditi sets in. That's how the Dhamma protects you. Because there's no way a Sotapanna could end up in the hell. So even if you feel like, even if you feel that you are going to be doing an unwholesome deed, even if you feel like you want to do something bad, something wrong, you can only do it to the point where none of those things can actually bring you birth in the woeful plane. If the next thing you do, it could be just lifting a finger. If the next thing you do, remember we talked about assisted suicide some time ago, and how in some countries now it's been legalized. And when parents are old and sometimes they're in great excruciating pain, they go through that process of assisted suicide, and what the doctors have to do is they have to get the consent of family, and generally when it's family, it's the children. So what happens if a child signs off, gives consent to the mother's assisted suicide or the father's, either of the parents' assisted suicide? What they have condoned is the death of their parents. That becomes a panchanantariya papaka. So if you're a Sotapanna, see, this is how the Dhamma protects us. If you become a Sotapanna, that will never happen. Even, the doctor might come to you and say, hey mister, we've come to speak to you now, it's time to say goodbye. You have to sign on this dotted line, and you have to give us your consent to put an end to your parents' suffering. She's been suffering for so long. Yeah, and it's only right that you feel this way about your parents. Yes, you want them to rest in peace, right? All these lovely things about how it's lovely in the afterlife, right? I'm sure they'll go to a better place. Well, then I begs the question, why didn't you send them to a better place, much earlier on? Think about it, right? When people die, what do they say? Oh, they're now in a much better place than this. Well, why didn't you just send them off like 10 years ago? If that's a better place, why delay it? Anyway, let's come back. So the doctor brings you that document that you have to sign. As you go to sign it, you might knock over a glass of water and the document is ruined and you can no longer sign it. And then some other engagement comes along, and the next time the document comes to you, the house might burn down. The hospital might burn down, but you are not going to sign that document. It's just not going to happen. And even if you did sign that document, something's going to happen between you signing the document and the doctor going and pulling the plug. Something's going to happen between those two things, preventing the doctor from actually committing that deed. of putting an end to that person's life. Why? Because as soon as he does that, who's given consent to it? The child has given consent to it, and therefore it's a heinous crime. You've just committed one of the Pancha Anantariya Papa Karma. So if you're a Sotapanna, that will just not happen. I think once I gave you the example. Say someone deliberately stabs one of their parents, and now the parents on the floor, the father's on the floor, the child stabbed the father, and the child's a Sotapanna. Very unlikely this can happen, but let's say it has happened. The child stabs the father's now on the floor, he's grasping for breath. But before that last breath goes away, someone will come and shoot him in the head. Why? Because the cause of death cannot be the stab. Why? Because he's a Sotapanna. That just cannot happen. So it's only the Pancha Anantariya Papa Karma that cannot happen by a Sotapanna. For the Pancha Anantariya Papa Karmas and any one of the 10 unwholesome deeds to a level of gravity which will end up in that person going to the hells. That just cannot happen. But anything the other side of it can happen. So a Sotapanna could be responsible for the death of somebody. A Sotapanna could be involved in theft, could be involved in sensual misconduct, could be involved in lying, slander, frivolous speech, all the unwholesome deeds. But not to the degree where it's going to be responsible or it's going to be grievous enough for that person to end up in the hells. So, whilst Vishaka at the age of 7 realized where the real problem lies, from time to time, that wisdom is covered up. It's clouded. And then grief can set in. Desire can set in. How can you go on to have children if you don't have desire? Like I said, I think last week, it's according to some sources, she went on to have 12, 13, and some say 20, 30, I've heard in one source, right? She went on to have so many children, and she was a Sotapanna. If you've perfected Sammaditthi, if you've perfected it, then at the point where you are about to make a child, you have to realize, actually, what I'm doing now is planting the seeds of grief. I'm planting the seed of sorrow, so I'm not going to do this. But no, it doesn't happen. Why? Because the hindrances are still there. They still prevail. But what's not going to happen is those hindrances will not lead you to commit a deed that takes you to the hells. Okay? And then, though Mahanama Sakya attained the Sotapanna, he was finding it difficult to control his anger with his fellow workers. Yes. So remember, it's only an Anagami that has completely eradicated Patiga, Kamaraga and Patiga. Even a Sakurdagami, it's only reduced in them to some extent, but not eradicated completely. But it's once you become an Anagami, that Patiga, which is, so again, Patiga cannot just be taken as anger. Because if you look at the etymology of the word, Ga is to be at conflict. Gatena, Ga is to be at conflict. Pati is to bind, attached. So for as long as this defilement of patiga lies within someone, they are attached to conflict. They are prepared to get into conflict with somebody. For whatever gain, and that will be different for each one, you're prepared to get into conflict, by hook or by crook. I'm prepared to fight for it. I'm prepared to have a go at him for it. So that's patiga. And that is eradicated when you become an Anagami, as well as Kamaraga. So again, I think previously we talked about what Kamaraga is and how that differs from Ruparaga. When we talk about the 5 senses, Rupa Raga involves mainly the eyes and the ears, and receiving sensual pleasure through your eyes and ears. But Kama Raga involves the other three senses: taste, touch, and smell. So an anagami would still, he or she is prepared to enjoy sensual pleasure through the other three senses, because it's not attachment. Remember, attachment exists all the way until someone becomes an arahant. In fact, in the 12 unwholesome deeds, in the 12 unwholesome chittas, 4 go away at the point of becoming a Sakurdagami. The other 8 exists all the way until you become an arahat. So they don't go away at the point of becoming Sakurdagami. They don't go away at the point of becoming an anagami. The other 8 unwholesome chittas, based in lobha, based in desire, rooted in desire even, they are with you until you become an arahatun vahanse. So even an anagami enjoys sensual pleasure through all the 5 senses. But what he's not prepared to do is go looking for it. Go through samsara to seek that pleasure. The upadana stage of it does not arise in an anagami. The 3 senses that I speak of, which is taste, smell, and touch. However, when it comes to sight and sound, I'm all in. So when an anagami sees the statue of a Buddha, when he sees the sight of a Buddha, there are some anagamis who are Brahmas, who still are unable to become an arahatun vahanses, because they're attached to the figure of the Buddha. When they see the Buddha, they can't let go of that. They're so attached to it. And some are attached to the Dhamma, and you can't let go of it. So attachment comes in all sizes, shapes and forms. But what we only need to worry about is what our problem is right now. So if you are not an anagami as yet, don't worry about the feelings you feel towards the Buddha. That deep feelings of respect, the feelings of praise that come within, they all help you, guide you towards Nibbana. And the attachment that you have towards the Dhamma, don't let go of that already. You're still in the middle of the river. Don't jump off the raft. Be attached to the raft, because it's the raft that you need to get across to the other side. Once you are at the other side, now you can let go. The raft and the oar is what's going to save you. If you're in the middle of the river and you let go of the oar, hey, I'm not attached to anything, now how are you going to get to the other side? If you jump off the raft, now how are you going to get to the other side? So don't be at a rush. When it's time, they will happen. You see, none of the fetters, none of the dasa sanyojana, you have to let go by force. It's not something that you have to do. It happens when the time's right. Like when in autumn, the leaves fall from the tree. The tree doesn't shake them off, does it? No, the tree doesn't do that. When it's time, the leaves fall. Likewise, when it's time for you, these fetters, they'll start disappearing. What you have to do is practice the Dhamma. Sunata dharita charata. Listen to the Dhamma, bear the Dhamma, and don't stop there. Practice the Dhamma. And the Dhamma is the medicine that helps you cure this attachment that you have to all worldly things. What, isn't the Dhamma a worldly thing? Indeed. Nibbana is the only thing that is not worldly. That is supra-mundane. Everything else is mundane. Even the Dhamma is mundane. And Arahatun Vahansa is not attached even to the Dhamma. Remember when the Buddha passed away, those monks that didn't cry were all Arahatun Vahansas. Everyone else had a tear in their eye. Because they were still attached. But that attachment helps you get there. Remember last week I gave you the example of climbing up onto a tree, and then you have to chop it as you're on the tree, bits of it off, step by step you keep chopping it off until you get to the ground. So don't try to jump off the tree while you're on top of it, because you're going to break a leg. Don't do that. Step by step. Time is the best healer, right? Once you've gotten yourself the Dhamma, then time is the best healer. But without the Dhamma, no time is going to save you. No amount of time can save you without the Dhamma. But once you're armed with the Dhamma, then let time do its thing. All you have to do is practice the Dhamma. Listen to the Dhamma, reflect on the Dhamma, and what you do is think about the things you're attached to. First the Buddha says, let go of the unwholesome deeds. He didn't say everything, what we need to do now is let go of the Dhamma. That's not what he said. He said first, sabba papa sakarana, not sabba dhamma karana. Sabba papa sakarana. And to let go, to stop, abstain from committing the unwholesome deeds, there's only one thing you need to do, and that is practice the Dhamma. Mahanama Sakya, he couldn't control his anger with his fellow workers. Why? Spatika still exists in his mind. There's still anger. The defilement of anger is still there. He's still attached. Attachment is the problem always. Every single time it's attachment. So remember, he's not an Arahatan Vanse. He's still attached. Even an Anagami, there are things that can upset an Anagami. There are things that can distress an Anagami. Why? He's still attached to things. Whenever you're attached to something, take away the thing that you're attached to. Now what happens? Suffering. Always. It doesn't matter who you are. This is why the only path to liberation from suffering is to eradicate attachment. Nothing else. What is the assurance that this sort of bad karma would not touch his Chutisita at the last moment of one's life since this incident is associated with his life after he became a Sotapanna? So it doesn't matter whether the incident happened before you became a Sotapanna or after you became a Sotapanna, or after you become a Sotapanna. At the point of Chuti, when it's your last moment alive, I think we touched on this last week as well, even if something unwholesome that you've done, you're reminded of, you look at it from a different point of view. Why? Dhammo have rakkati dhammachari. The Dhamma steps in all the time. It steps in to protect you. That's like having a best friend around. It's like having a good best friend around. The Dhamma is your best friend. Once you become a Sotapanna, he's always with you. He or she, give it a name if you like. Give your friend a name if you like. The Dhamma is always with you. You're free to go and do unwholesome deeds, but the moment, the next thing you do, the next finger you lift is a deed that you're going to commit that's going to take you to the hells. That I'm not going to let you do. You will not do that. There's no better best friend. There's no better friend than the Dhamma. So at the moment of Chuti, even if it's an unwholesome deed that you're reminded of, that comes to your mind at that point in time. Remember, I think last week we talked about someone picking someone's pocket, right? Yeah. So you're on a bus, and it's the deed you've done is you've picked someone's pocket, and this is the bad deed that comes into your mind at the point of death. But if you are not a Sotapanna and you're still attached to worldly things, like a mundane person, a worldly mundane person, or a prutakjana, what you're going to do is immediately you see that pocket or that purse, that wallet in someone's pocket, you're going to put your arm in there. You're going to put your hand in there to pick it up. And as you put your hand in there, that action itself is what's going to take you into the hells. It's literally that action that's going to take you into the hells. It's like taking a dive into a swimming pool. That action's going to take you into the hell. But as a Sotapanna, you're going to look at that and go, what's the point? In a world that's anicca dukkha anatta, what have I got to gain by picking someone's pocket? And even if it's a bad deed you've done after you've become a Sotapanna, again at the moment of death, you're not going to get to the level, the Dhamma is going to step in at the point where the next thing you do is going to take you to the hell. So, as you've said here, he found it difficult to control his anger with his fellow workers. So let's say, at the point of Mahanama's death, he's reminded of his workers, and his workers are in front of him, and they're not doing his work properly. He might shout at them, and this is his Chutisita, right? He might shout at them, but where the next word he says, he's going to commit a deed that's going to take him to the hells. The Dhamma is going to step in. You're not going to say that word. You just won't come into his mind at that point. What an insurance plan that is. What a great insurance plan that is. And I often ask parents, think about all the precious things that you own, right? Your house, your car, your jewelry. You've taken out insurance plans for all of these things. Most of you will have. Even the wristwatch, some people take out insurance plans for that. Even your mortgage has an insurance plan. It's called the Mortgage Payment Protection Plan. But what about the most precious thing that you have? Some of you are thinking of your children, others thinking about yourself. The most precious thing you have is your human life. But as a parent, you might think, well, my child, have you taken out an insurance plan for them? Isn't this the best insurance plan you need to give them? The insurance plan of having become a Sotapanna? Isn't that the friend that you need to introduce to them? The friend that's always going to be there, where even after their death? Because parents, you're not going to be around forever. So what about when you're not there? You need to introduce your children to a good friend. A friend that's going to be around with them forever. Until the last moment they're in samsara. And that's the friend of Dhamma. So that's what happens when someone becomes a Sotapanna. Now, I'm going to move on to this next question. Bhante, could you please explain the Noble Eightfold Path in practice? The Noble Eightfold Path, that is the only path. That is the only solution to the problem. There is no other path. There is no other treatment for the real problem. There are various treatments for all other problems. Have you come across this time when the Buddha once speaks to Ananda, and Venerable Ananda, and says, Ananda, the suffering that remains for someone who's become a Sotapanna is like these 7 stones. He picks up 7 pebbles or stones, whatever you want to call them, or small rocks. He puts them on a surface and he says, it's like these 7 stones. The suffering that remains for someone who's not a Sotapanna is like all the stones and all the rocks on this planet. So that's the comparison that he uses. The suffering that remains for someone who's a Sotapanna is just as much as these 7 stones or pebbles. Now, I was thinking about what might he have meant by that. Because for some time I was thinking, how does he relate stones to suffering? Where's the connection? And then I realized, because you see, in trying to relieve ourselves from suffering, not redeem ourselves from suffering, in trying to relieve ourselves from suffering, we always think the problem is outside. When you think and when you believe that the problem is outside, there are so many things outside. When you point your finger at the world, at society, at the car, at animals and trees and birds and bees and other human beings. You're pointing your, I mean, you don't have enough fingers if you wanted to point at everyone at the same time. You only got 10 fingers in both your hands. But how many different things are out there in the world? I mean, just right here. If I wanted to point a finger at all of you, I haven't got enough fingers at the same time. But if I wanted to point at the true source of the problem, I've got 9 fingers spare. I only need one. I've got 9 fingers too many for that. But when you're wanting to point the finger at the world outside, then it's countless. So that's where he uses this analogy, and he says, you know, the suffering that remains for someone who's not a Sotapanna is like all the rocks that make up this planet. Why? Because what is it? What is the suffering that we go through? It's the suffering of this pain of agony, this pelima, this frustration, this anxiety that we go through. And when someone's in agony, when someone's frustrated, when someone's disappointed, if you haven't entered the Noble Eightfold Path, if you haven't received, or if you haven't entered Samma Ditti, if you haven't been endowed with Samma Ditti, then you're going to be pointing your finger at the world outside. How many different things are there? Countless. But if you then start pointing the finger at yourself and go, actually no, the problem's not outside, the problem's with me. Now you're pointing internally. Now you're pointing at the true source of the problem. So why does he say 7? Why was it not 6? Why was it not 1? Why not 5? Why not 10? Why does he say 7? Because he speaks of the 7 steps that remain from that point forward. From when someone enters the Sotapanna Marga, then there's Sotapanna Pala, Sakurdagami Marga, Sakurdagami Pala, Anagami Marga, Anagami Pala, Arihat Marga, Arihat Pala. The 7 steps that remain for one to redeem themselves from suffering once and for all. 7 more steps. But until you at least become a Sotapanna Marga, until you at least enter the Sotapanna path, where are you pointing your finger? Outside. Everything that exists outside. How many? Countless. Infinite number of things, infinite number of people, beings, the problems with you, the problems with you, the problems not with me. Now, before this is related to the question as well. So again, I'm thinking back to the conversation I had with those monks as I came here, and I said, it's suffering that makes this world go round. It is suffering that makes this world go round. Why? Because there are 2 ways to be happy in this world. One is the noble way, the other is the ignoble way. One's the Arya way and the other is the Anarya way. The Anarya way is to find relief from suffering, and that brings you happiness. When you're hungry, eat, that brings you happiness. Rash, scratch, happiness. Headache, paracetamol, happiness. Toothache, pull your tooth out, happiness, right? So that's relief from suffering. And then there's the Arya way, the noble way. Go to the root of suffering. Eradicate it once and for all. Now you've redeemed yourself from suffering, never to come back. Now, why is it pain, why is it suffering that makes this world go round? Because 99.99999% of all sentient beings The way that they know to happiness, the path that they know to happiness is not the second, it's the first. Relief from suffering. Why do people go and work? Why are people employed? Why do people go to school? Why do people earn money? All of that to relieve themselves from suffering. Like I said, why does the boxer get into the boxing ring? To find relief from suffering. Because when he gets in there, he's going to earn some money. He's going to earn fame. He's going to earn himself fans. Because there's a suffering internally, he's prepared to undergo physical pain, physical torture, to relieve himself from mental pain and mental torture. The desire to have fans, the desire to have money, the desire to have fame, the desire to be number one, to be the champion, right? All of these are mental attachments. So for as long as a boxer wants to enjoy these pleasures, what has he got to do? He's got to go and subject himself to suffering. Why is the farmer in the paddy field? He's going through suffering to relieve himself from suffering, so he can go and do the things that he likes in his life. Why does a mother give birth to a child? Put yourself through pain to relieve yourself from pain, but never redeeming yourself from pain, because that's the Arya way, not the Anarya way. And Anarya does not know how, this real source of the problem. An Anarya, an ignoble person, does not know, he does not understand, he or she does not understand how pain and suffering can be eradicated, how the source for suffering can be eradicated. All they know is how it could be relieved, and therefore they go through that. So, where that conversation ended was, if you ever want someone to do something for you, what's the best way to get it done? Find what it is that hurts them. If you want someone to do something for you, find what it is that hurts them, and then do that to them. And what are they going to do then? They're going to find a way to relieve themselves from suffering. Provided what they're going to do to relieve themselves from suffering is ultimately going to end up in you receiving what you want, well, that's the best way to get something done. Think about parents. When you wanted your children to do something for you, you promised them, I'm going to give you this, I'm going to buy you chocolate, I'm going to buy you a bike, now go do your homework. The child never wanted to do his homework. He wanted to play with his friends, play on the computer, listen to music, go to party. But that's not what the parents wanted. So what did the parent do? They looked for what it is that hurts him. Where's the source? What is it? What buttons can I push that's going to hurt you? And hurt comes in two ways. Suffering comes in two ways. One, punishment. Two, expectation. Aren't these the two ways you use, the two methods you use to bring up your children? Either you punish them, or you give them expectation. You give them an expectation of reward. If you do this, you'll get this. Now that expectation, for as long as the seed of expectation has been planted in them, now they're in suffering. Mentally they're waiting for that expectation to come true. For as long as that expectation hasn't come true, it hasn't materialized, now that's agony, that's frustration, that's disappointment. Anxiety, you're waiting for that expectation. It's like, think about when you had to wait for something that you really like to come through. You go online, you order something. Your favorite gadget. You ordered it and now you're waiting. And they say it's going to arrive you in 3 days' time. 2 days go by and then it's a postal strike. How did that make you feel? No, waiting, we don't like waiting. Where it's the things that we like, we don't like waiting. Because that's painful. That feeling is not a pleasurable one. Remember we put our scores a few weeks back? How we kept score of, setting expectations, wanting to acquire what it is you desire. The moment you attach yourself to something, the moment you've started to desire something, the time between planting that seed of desire and you acquiring what it is that you desire, that duration of time is not pleasurable. That's painful. Because that's the feeling of expectation. Waiting for that expectation to come true, that's not a pleasurable feeling, is it? No, because how do we know? Because as soon as you have acquired what it is you desired, now you feel happy, you feel pleasure. To feel pleasure, you have to be in suffering beforehand. Because if that theory is true, then clearly you have to have been in suffering beforehand. You apply for a job and you wait for a response back. You apply for a visa and you wait for a response back. That time it takes for the visa to come through, don't you go online and check every day? Refresh, refresh, refresh. Think of when you sat for an exam, waiting for results to come through, and you've been informed that it's going to be tonight. Refresh, refresh, refresh. F5, F5, F5. Because that feeling is not pleasurable. This is why you're banging on your keyboard. Result night, when election results night, you're waiting for that final result to be announced. That feeling is not pleasurable. It's agonizing. So as soon as you planted this seed of expectation in your child, you washed the dishes, I'm going to give you pocket money. Now, as long as the child enjoys that, the child gives value to that. That could be pocket money to some, it could be a pizza for the other, it could be a chocolate, it could be a new bike, it could be a computer game, whatever the case might be. And that's where you have to be skillful, finding out what it is that hurts them. And you tell me you love your children? Why do you look to hurt them so much? I mean, this is the way the world works. Find what it is that hurts them. Then either, so like I said, there are two things that hurt you. It's either punishment or expectation. That expectation that has been planted, and the time between the planting of the expectation and you receiving it, that duration is very painful. So it's these two things that makes the world go round. And so when your child is in agony, either through punishment, so you hit him, or you've scolded him, shouted at him or her. Now, if that experience was painful, clearly, punishment is painful. If you've hit your children, you know that your children don't like it. So, because you don't want to go through that again, you are not inclined to do the same mistake again, right? That's one way. The second is, once you've planted that seed of expectation, here's the reward for good behavior. Because that waiting for that expectation to come true is agonizing, they want to find relief from that as soon as possible. So to find relief from that pain, what are they willing to do? What you ask them to do. Do the homework, wash the dishes, go to school, become first in class, so they can relieve themselves from the suffering, from the pain of expectation. So I said, look at all these people outside. Aren't all of them in suffering? Either they're trying to avoid punishment, or they're trying to achieve what expectations they have set for themselves. The expectations that they have either set for themselves, they want to fulfill them, or expectations that they have promised to their spouses, to their children, to their bosses, and now they're going about trying to find ways to fulfill them. This is what makes the world go round. It's always suffering that makes the world go round. This is why once you found out, hey, that's where suffering is, that's where the real problem is, now you're no longer interested in going round with the world. That's when you become lokottara. supramundane. You want to get out of this silly game. The games whose rules you didn't set. No one asked me. I'll ask you a question. If someone asked you, to be happy in life, shall we design a system where you have to go through education, go to school at grade 1, then 13 years of schooling? Would you like that to be the case? How many of you would raise your arm up and say, yeah, I'd love that? Wouldn't you have gone for a better, something that would actually please you? No, we go to school not because we like, but we have to. There's no choice about that. If someone asked you, hey, we are designing this game of life, who's in favor of you have to do a job to make a living? Who's in favor? Would any of you raise your arm up and say, yeah, I'm up for that? No. You would come up with a different way. You would come up with, now I wish for it to be there and now I want it there. That's what happens in the Paranimita Vasavarti, Deva world. Because of the power of the merits that they have done, all you have to do is wish for it and it appears in front of you. Well, unfortunately, you and I have not been so meritorious in our past births. So we have to work hard for it. To acquire what it is we desire, we have to work for it. You can't just think about it and then it appears. We don't have Aladdin and his magic lamps. So, once you've understood, that's where the problem lies. Not outside, but the problem lies with me. It's always expectation that brings me suffering. Now that, once you've done that, then you've entered the Noble Eightfold Path. And now you're in Sammaditthi. This Noble Eightfold Path is not something that you have to develop deliberately. It's not something that you have to do to cultivate. It cultivates, it develops on its own. You don't have to do anything. I mean, how great is that, right? You really don't have to do anything. Because the Dhamma fulfills the Dhamma. Once you've entered the Noble Eightfold Path, this is a stream. This is why you're called a stream enterer once you become a Sotapanna. Think about a stream. Where does the water flow from the stream? To the ocean. If you're in the stream and you don't do anything, where's the water going to take you? Towards the ocean. You don't have to do anything for that. You can just stand still. It's going to take you. The water's going to take you to the ocean. All you have to do is enter the stream. That's difficult. That's taking that U-turn we spoke about last week. But once you've taken that U-turn and you've jumped into the water, now the water is going to take you, the current in the water is going to take you towards the ocean. And the Noble Eightfold Path is going to fulfill. You don't have to do anything about it. Let me give you an example. So, Samma Kammanta, right action. I emphasize, right does not cut it, but I'm not going to go over it again. Okay, so we've discussed that in the past. Samma Kammanta, because we've given the etymology of what Samma is in the past, right? So Samma Kammanta, according to the Satya Vibhanga Sutra discourse, it's Panatipata Veramani, Adinnadana Veramani, Kamesu Michachara Veramani, Ayang Uchatauso Samma Kammanta. So this is right action. What does the word Veramani mean? I mean, we chant that every day, right? When we observe the 5 precepts. Panatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. Adinnadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. What does Veramani mean? Refrain. Okay, refrain. Good. But let's pick it apart. These words have meaning. Veramani. Have you heard of the word Ramane? So for our listeners online, I'm going to have to use some Sinhala here. But I'll give the English translations. Ramanaya karanawa. What does that mean? To indulge. Ramanaya karanawa is to indulge in something. Ramanaya karanaking venvenawa. Venvenawa is to withdraw. Withdraw from indulgence. Veramani. Samma kammanta is not Panatipata Veramani Sikkapadam. That's not what Samma kammanta is. There are no Sikkapadam Samadhiyamis in Samma kammanta, or in Samma Vacha, or in Samma Ajiva, or in Samma Vayama. There are no Sikkapadam Samadhiyamis. None of that. Because when you say Sikkapadam Samadhiyami, that's a ritual. It's a precept that you have to observe, something that you have to do deliberately, something that you have to make effort to do or not to do. So, if you've observed the 5 precepts and you say, for instance, there's some circumstance or some situation where you have to lie to somebody, you're reminded, hang on a second, I observed the 5 precepts. As soon as I lie, I'm going to break a precept, so I'm not going to do it. That is you observing a precept. For as long as you observe that precept, you're going to act within the borders, within the boundary of that precept. It's like when your kids were young, or think about yourselves. When you were 4, 5, 6 years of age, your parents had to force you to go and brush your teeth. Sometimes they shouted at you. Sometimes they'd hit you. You haven't brushed your teeth today? Go brush your teeth right now. But do they still do that to you? I hope not. At some point in life, you went through some education, some form of education, be that at school or you went online or whatever the case might be, and you learned. You studied and you began to understand why brushing teeth is so important. Because if you don't brush your teeth, how the bacteria that live inside your mouth are going to start eating away and it's going to destroy your teeth. When that understanding came to you, from that point forward, you didn't need your parents to come and push you to go brush your teeth. Because you understand, not brushing my teeth is harmful. But before you understood that, you brushed your teeth for whom? For your parents. To keep them happy so that they wouldn't hit you. But now you brush your teeth, why? Not to keep your parents happy. Now you brush your teeth to maintain your own hygiene, your personal hygiene. This is for your own good, not for your parents. But until you came to that understanding, you needed someone to give you a precept to observe. Every day before bed, I shall brush my teeth. You observe that precept. Didn't we all observe that precept? Yeah, these are all precepts that we observe. You've been observing precepts well before the monk at the temple said, here are 5 precepts, now go and let's all observe them. Why? Your parents gave you precepts to observe. After 6 p.m. you have to be indoors. Especially ladies here, you'll have been given such precepts by your parents. When it's dark outside, you will be home before it's dark. I don't mind that you're going out with him, but be home before it's dark. These are all precepts. Why do we observe these precepts? Because until we come to full understanding why something is wrong, how something can be harmful, how something can be dangerous to us rather. You need a precept to remind you. You need a precept to guide you to be on track. But once that understanding has set in, you no longer need a precept to observe. There's a discourse called the Dukkattaka Sutta Niddesha. I think it's in the Majjhima Nikaya. Duttattaka Sutta Niddesha. where the Lord Buddha says, Yang samadhanang tang vatang, sangvarattena silam. Yang samadhanang tang vatang. Samadhana is to observe. Sil samadhan, right? But actually what you're observing is not sil. This is what that verse says. Yang samadhanang tang vatang, not silam. He didn't say yang samadhanang tang silam. He said yang samadhanang tang vatang. What is a vata? It's a ritual. A vata is a vrutaya, a circle. A circle has a boundary. For as long as you observe that precept, you're going to conduct yourself within the boundary of this circle. That's why it's called a vata. That's why it's called a ritual. You know, the rituals that we conduct as Buddhists, right? If you ever change religion, if say you became a Muslim, you're no longer going to go and worship an idol. You're no longer going to go take flowers because they have different sets of rituals and practices. But as a Buddhist, you're observing a certain set of rituals, and you're following what has been handed down to you and passed down to you and been taught to you. So you observe that. Now that's a ritual. That's a vata. But sangvarattena silam. Sangvara. Sang is again ignorance and attachment. Varana is to prune. You know how you prune your bushes at home? When you do your gardening, you prune them. You cut bits off. So sangvara. Through the Dhamma, you start pruning ignorance and attachment. Sangvarattena silam. So this sila, if I use the word virtue as the translation for sila, this virtue is instilled within you when you start pruning ignorance and attachment. But here's the question. When does one start to prune ignorance and attachment? When does one start to do that? Well, when they realize why you need to do it. I mean, you don't do things without reason. When does someone understand that I have to start pruning ignorance and attachment? When they realize this is the cause for a problem. When does that happen? When someone becomes a Sotapanna. When someone enters the Noble Eightfold Path and steps onto that first step, which is Samma Ditti, I have to start pruning avidya and tanha, ignorance and attachment. Now you've come to right view. Now you realize where the real problem is. The problem's not outside. The problem's not with the next door neighbor. The problem is with avidya and tanha, with ignorance and attachment. So what do I have to do now? Start pruning ignorance and attachment. Sangvara. Sangvarattena silam. Attena means, that's the meaning behind. The literal translation of that would be the meaning behind, or with that meaning. So sangvarattena silam. Sila or virtue is instilled within someone who has started pruning, or who is in the process of pruning ignorance and attachment. So one day when ignorance and attachment have been pruned all the way down to zero, nil, then on when that day comes, we'll all have been instilled with perfect virtue as an arahant. Until such time, we will require the help of a vata, of a virtue. This is why we observe the precepts, to guide us on that path. Once you become an arahant, you wouldn't have to come here and say Panatipata Veramani Sikkapadang Samadhiyami. See, Sikkapada, not Silapada. You never said Panatipata Veramani Silam Padang Samadhiyami, did you? No, because it's Sikkapada, not Silapada. What is Sikka? Shiksha. What is Shiksha? Training. Training to become what? An arahant. What are we training for? To become an arahant. So these are the virtues, the rituals, the practices that help us become an arahant. This is why we observe those precepts, to get to that goal. But once you begin to understand that it's ignorance and attachment that's the cause for the problem, and now you start pruning them, then by the amount by which you have pruned ignorance and attachment, by that amount virtue has been instilled within you. So the virtue that's instilled within you as a Sotapanna begins to grow. When you become a Sakurdagami, you are more virtuous than a Sotapanna. Not by doing anything, but that's the nature of your understanding. Why? Because by that much you've pruned ignorance and attachment. Sangvarattena sila. I mean, think about it. Let's take a practical example. Stealing. We observe the precept Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami. I observe the precept, as in I observe this practice, so I can train myself to become an Arahant. This is the full form of it, right? I'm putting in the icing on the cake. I observe this precept so I can complete my training to become an Arahant, to abstain from stealing. This is Adinadana Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami in its expanded form. Now what am I saying? I am still prone to stealing. I am still prone to theft. Isn't that why we observe the precept? What if you never felt like stealing? What if you never felt the need to steal? Well, then you wouldn't need to observe the precept. Like I say, your parents don't bring a stick or shout at you now to go brush your teeth, because it's no longer required. It's only while it's required we have to observe the precept. Punya Papa Pahinasa, that state of mind is only that of an Arahant. So until you become an Arahant, we will have to observe precepts. Well, as bhikkhus we observe 227 precepts. You only have to worry about 5. I have 227 that I need to keep track of. But each of these to help guide me towards becoming an Arahant. This is why I say you travel on a bike and I travel on a rocket. Each of these precepts the Buddha has given us all to be mindful. To be mindful of our conduct. To be mindful of our thoughts. You know, you lift an arm. Why is it you lifted that arm? What are you about to do? Are you about to steal something? Are you about to kill? Are you about to harm someone? If so, don't do it. So, once you become a Sotapanna, see, the reason I'm emphasizing this point is, we can't start practicing the Noble Eightfold Path until you become a noble person. It just doesn't, I mean, it doesn't make sense. That's why it's called the Noble Eightfold Path. That's why it's called the Arya Ashtangika Marga. If you are an Anarya, it's not within your domain, it doesn't make sense. By the way, I'm not saying you're Anaryas. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is, you have to become an Arya first. You have to become a Sotapanna first to start practicing the Noble Eightfold Path. And then the Noble Eightfold Path cultivates by itself. The Dhamma cultivates the Dhamma. So once you enter this first step of Samma Ditti, then Samma Sankappa, Avyapada Sankappa, Nekkamma Sankappa, Avihinsa Sankappa, Ayang Uchatauso Samma Sankappa. So previously, before you became a Sotapanna, the world was your oyster. Everything in the world was, you know, all you saw when you looked at the world was, hey, it's a pool of pleasure, it's a world of pleasure, it's an ocean of pleasure. All of this pleasure is for me to gain, for me to go and have. And you saw it as being Ichcha Sukha Atta. This world is to my liking. This world is pleasurable. And existence in this world is meaningful, it's pleasurable, it should be continued. With that view, see, wrong view. See, for as long as we have wrong view within ourselves, the Arya Ashtanga Marga is also going to be a vata. It's also going to be a precept. So really, until you become a Sotapanna, what you could do potentially is observe 8 precepts. Not the 8 precepts that you observe when you come to observe Sil, but you could observe Miccha sankappa veramani sikkapadang samadhiyami. Miccha kammanta veramani sikkapadang samadhiyami. Miccha vacha veramani sikkapadang samadhiyami. Why? It's not going to be instilled within you until you become a Sotapanna. So you have to observe it as a precept. Once you become a Sotapanna, you no longer have to observe it as a precept. It's going to be instilled. It's like installing a software. Once the software has been installed, the package comes with it. So, Samma Sankappa, Avihinsa Sankappa, Nekkamma Sankappa, Avyapada Sankappa. Ayang Uchata also Samma Sankappa. So Avihinsa Sankappa. So this is, Vihinsa is harming, hurting, feelings of animosity. But when you have been instilled with Samma Sankappa, then Avyapada Sankappa, Avihinsa Sankappa. So Avihinsa Sankappa is what? Non-animosity. Feelings of malevolence. Feelings of goodness, kindness, generosity, compassion. Avyapada Sankappa. Previously it used to be Vyapada Sankappa. Feelings of anger and animosity. Now, even when people come and shout at you, people come and find fault with you, you see, you stop pointing the finger outside. Anything that makes you upset, finger point inwards, not outwards. But you see, until you come to that understanding, you're always going to be pointing the finger outwards, aren't you? Isn't that what we did all along? All our lives, think about it. Whenever someone did something that you didn't like, where did we point the finger? At them. Why are you making me angry? Why are you making me upset? Yesterday at the end of a sermon at the monastery, there was a young man who came and sat down with his wife. And he said, Swamin Maharaj, can you please advise my wife not to be angry all the time? So he wants me to give advice to his wife. And I said, do you never feel anger? I do, but she gets angry more than I do. I said, you should be grateful. You should be glad. She gets angry at home. Why? So you can check yourself. When she gets angry, how does that make you feel? Do you still feel anger? Well, what if one fine day you think, hang on a second, I've not felt anger for like the last 3 weeks. Maybe I don't feel angry anymore. And then you come into this mindset, I don't feel anger anymore. And then one fine day someone comes and shouts at you, and then you feel anger all of a sudden. Hey, I thought I didn't feel anger anymore. Well, now you've got it at home. Your wife's helping you. Shouldn't you be grateful that she gets angry at you? She's always constantly reminding you, hey, you still got anger in you. The fire of anger is still within you. The fire of aversion is still within you. You still got work to do. Isn't that great? So what are you complaining about? Go home. I said, stop trying to point the finger at her. Sort yourself out. Don't think he expected that from me. I doubt he's going to come and ask me again. You see, we always try to fix the other person. And I said, if ever you're upset when your wife's shouting at you, when your wife's angry at you, and that makes you upset, the problem's not with her. The problem's with you. If you were an arahant, would you ever come and complain to me that your wife gets so angry at home? No, you would never complain to me about that. So does that not tell you something? Does that not tell you that the problem is with you? I wasn't having a go at him, by the way. What I was trying to point out was the problem is with you. Of course, the wife's listening by the side as well. She sat down and she's listening as well. And this is why I went on to say, if you ever get angry at somebody, and he was saying, sometimes she starts screaming. She starts throwing things on the floor, banging on the walls, banging on cupboards and things like that. Poor wife, she was sat there without a word. She's listening to all this. I felt sorry for her. And then I said, if you feel angry, it's okay to shout. It's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. Shout. But before you shout, go in front of the mirror and now shout all you like. If you feel like you want to bang something, go in front of the mirror and now start banging the person that you can see in the mirror. Because no one else is responsible for your anger. There's always you, nobody else. Until we get to that understanding, until we are completely convinced. Now, you see, here's a question you can ask yourself. Am I completely convinced that whenever I'm angry, the problem is with me? Ask yourself this question right now. Whenever I'm angry, whenever I'm feeling upset, whenever I'm feeling sad, am I completely 100% convinced that the problem is with me? Or do you even for a tiny bit feel like pointing the finger outside? Ask yourself the question right now. And if you know 100% of the time the problem is with me, never outside, that's sammaditi. And what is the problem? Attachment. You're attached to something. That something the other person's trying to take away from you. Now what happens? Anger, frustration, disappointment, sorrow, grief. And you say the problem is with that person taking away what it is that you liked, what it is that you are attached to, what it is you desired. Well, why did you attach yourself to it in the first place? How about we treat that problem and not the problem outside? Because how long have we been trying to treat the other problem, the external problem? Well, for as long as we've been alive, right? Anyone had any luck with that? How's that going, by the way? 30 years, 40 years, 50, 60, I can see in the house. You've been trying to solve that problem that way. Did it work? Doesn't work. That's what the Buddha said. That doesn't work. So start the healing process inside, not outside. And once you are 100% convinced, now again, see, time to time, as you have raised a question here, Mahanama used to get angry with his fellow workers. And then he used to shout at them. So again, he's pointing the finger outside. But if you sat him down and asked him, tell me what it is that you really feel. Remove himself from the problem, sit him down and ask him, where do you think the problem is? He's going to say the problem's with me. But if you think about, the majority of people that live in this world, go to a business meeting. Who does everyone point the finger at? The suppliers, the other guy, the other company. Everyone's trying to fix the other person, not yourself. Go into a progress review meeting. Like you have these 6 monthly, yearly reviews with the boss and the worker, and you sit down. The boss asks, hey, you said you're gonna sell 100 units by the end of this quarter. You only sold 80. Yeah, because the customers didn't want it. It's the customer's fault. It's my colleague's fault, not mine. You always start with an excuse, and the excuse is always pointing the finger outside, not inside. Okay? So samma sankappa is avihinsa sankappa, nekkamma sankappa. What is nekkamma sankappa? Nekkamma is abstinence. Nekkamma is renunciation. But again, this is not something that you do volitionally. It's not something that you do deliberately. It's something that just happens. Why? Sangvara. Because you've been pruning ignorance and attachment. Now, I think what I'll do is, because of time, I think it's a Sunday afternoon, I know you've got things to do, and I'll continue this discussion at next week's sermon. So in fact, I'll give you examples of how the Noble Eightfold Path cultivates and develops for a Sotapanna, how in real life you come across situations and how someone who has entered the Noble Eightfold Path reacts to them and someone who hasn't reacts to those situations. Okay? So with that description, with that explanation, you'll be able to judge yourself. You'll be able to gauge where you are. Are you an Arya or are you an Anarya? And how each of the steps helps cultivate subsequent ones. And then finally, excuse me, and then finally how at Samma Jnana and Samma Vimukti, you complete the journey. So we talk about the Noble Eightfold Path, and there are 8, it's an 8-fold path, but at the end of the 8 there are another 2, Samma Jnana, Samma Vimukti. This is like the output that you get. That's why an Arahatun Vahanse is someone who is defined as Dasahangehi Samannagato Arahati iti Uchati. Dasahange, hunger. Dasahunger, 10. Once they've completed the Noble Eightfold Path, then Samma Jnana, Samma Vimukti. And I'll explain to you what those are. I'll do that at next sermon, because otherwise I think it's going to be late for you all to head home. Once again, apologies for the late start today. And I explained what the reason behind that was. So I'll leave that question for next week, and I'll pick it up. So I'll take this with me, and we can continue next week. Is that okay? Okay. So before we conclude then, and before we transfer merits, let us take a moment to do the Arya Maitri Bhavana. If you have copies with you, then it would be useful to bring them with you at least until you get used to it, but I think after a while you probably won't need them. And I was informed today that apparently this is the 49th sermon that we've done, which I think is an achievement. Well, perhaps next week we can speak. Let's not count our eggs before they hatch. Who knows? I might not be here next week. Not because of anything else, but who can give a certificate or guarantee on life, right? And I think the person who read the message out to me said that people are saying that it's thanks to me that we've been able to do this. But the point I want to really get across is what you see me doing is very little here. I'm just a small cog in this system. I'm small fry. Okay, the real people that put in the effort are all of you. Each and every one of you who made the time to come here when you have families that have set expectations on you, right? You're the real winners here. You're the real champions, not me. You have 100 times more duties and responsibilities than I do. When you come and speak to me, I know some of the battles that you have to do at home before you can find the opportunities to come here and be here. And that's what's great. Not this. I'm not bound to anybody or anyone, so I can be here anytime I want. But with you, that's what's great. I think that's what we need to celebrate, not me. We need to celebrate you. And the time you set aside when there are 100 other things you could be doing on a Sunday evening. And how, before you got to listen to the Dhamma, your goal was to become the greatest and the latest and the best in the world. But now you've set yourself different goals, different ambitions, and now you're seeking this path to Nibbana. What a turn you've had in your lives! What a change you've experienced in your lives! And you come and say these things with me. This is how I know. I can't read your minds. You share these stories with me. Like I said last week, that smile on your face is the greatest reward that you can give me. There's nothing more than that. When you come and tell me, Swami Vahanse, previously when I had problems at home, this is not how I used to react. I used to fight, I used to get angry, I used to shout, but now, having received the Buddha's Dhamma, I'm a completely different person. I can't imagine who I am now. I can't recognize who I am now to the person who I used to be. That's what we need to celebrate. Not who you're looking at. The people we need to celebrate is who I'm looking at. Well done, all of you. As well as everyone who put in the effort to make these sermons possible. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, as people tell me. Organizing these sermons, printing these things out, sending invites, sending messages, keeping you informed, hiring these venues, preparing the seating for you for when you arrive, offering you a drink at the end of the session. You know, these fans turn, these lights are on. You know, there's people behind all of this. None of this is by magic. And that's you. None of it is me. That's all you. Well done, you. Okay. So let's take a moment to do the Arya Maitri Bhava now, and then we'll conclude after that. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fire of birth, freed from the fire of decay, freed from the fire of illness, freed from the fire of death, freed from the fire of sorrow, freed from the fire of lamentation, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fire of suffering, freed from the fire of discontentment, freed from the fire of exhaustion, freed from the fire of disappointment, freed from the fire of clinging on to the five aggregates, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the suffering of samsara, freed from the disease of samsara, freed from the fear of samsara, freed from the fire of samsara, freed from the burning of samsara, freed from the sorrow of samsara, freed from the lust of samsara, freed from the clutches of samsara, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. The karma worlds are in despair. May I and all beings be freed from the karma worlds. The rupa worlds are in despair. May I and all beings be freed from the rupa worlds. The arupa worlds are in despair. May I and all beings be freed from the arupa worlds. All worlds are in despair. May I and all beings be freed from all the worlds. Nibbana is the only salvation. May all beings attain Nibbana. Nibbana is the only salvation. May all beings attain Nibbana. Nibbana is the only salvation. May all beings attain Nibbana. Letting go is the only salvation. May I and all beings let go. Detachment is the only salvation. May I and all beings be detached. Being freed is the only salvation. May I and all beings be freed. Nibbana is the only salvation. May I and all beings attain Nibbana. Nibbana is the only salvation. May I and all beings attain Nibbana. Nibbana is the only salvation. May I and all beings attain Nibbana. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the bondage of lust, freed from the bondage of aversion, freed from the bondage of delusion, freed from the bondage of Mara, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. 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 Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay. So, as usual, before we conclude, let us take a moment to transfer the merits that we have all acquired to all those who deserve the merits, who are expecting the merits that we have acquired, and to hope and wish for all of them to be able to redeem themselves from suffering, and for all of them to find the salvation of Nibbana. First and foremost, let's take a moment to reflect and acknowledge the fact that it is the Lord Buddha's Dhamma that we have the privilege, that we have this opportunity to discuss, to understand, to comprehend, and to unshackle ourselves from the clutches of samsara. And it's the Dhamma that He gifted to this world after many eons of selfless sacrifice. And then following that, all the bhikkhu, bhikkhunis, upasak, upasikas who sacrificed their lives, who dedicated their time to protecting and preserving this Dhamma, the Tripitaka, and having passed that down through the ages, today we have the privilege of studying the Tripitaka, of understanding it and learning the Dhamma, and finding solace within the Dhamma. So let us transfer the merits to the bhikkhu, bhikkhunis and upasaka, upasikas who dedicated their lives towards that. If any of them have been born in the woeful plane, may these merits help them be born in the blissful plane, and also may these merits help them attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Also take a moment to reflect on all the bhikkhu, bhikkhunis, upasaka, upasikas who strive and tirelessly work day and night to both understand the Dhamma for themselves and find their own salvation, but also to disseminate this Dhamma to all worldly sentient beings for their benefit, for their betterment, and for their redemption of suffering. May all those bhikkhu, bhikkhunis, upasaka, upasikas, which includes the chief prelate, the Mahanayakas, the Anunayakas, and also all the monks and nuns who reside wherever they are on this planet, may they all rejoice in these merits, and also both lay and the clergy who disseminate this Dhamma, may all of them be able to rejoice in these merits. May these merits help them all to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana in this very birth itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And also take a moment to transfer the merits to the chief incumbent monk of this temple, as well as the resident monks, including the Most Venerable Udve Dhammaloka Nayaka Swamin Wahanse. As well as that, take a moment to transfer these merits to the monks who are resident in your local temples, in your own villages, in your own towns, in your own cities. It's thanks to them that today you have become Buddhists, and today, through the transformation that you have had in your lives, through the impact and the influence that they had on your lives, on your upbringing, you have found salvation, you have found freedom, you have found happiness in the Buddha's teaching. So may they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired, and may they all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana in this very birth itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Also take a moment to transfer merits to the Devas, Brahmas, spirits, demons and the dead that we invited before starting this sermon, as well as all those beings who would have been your relations, your relatives in the infinitely long, endless journey in samsara. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. If any of them have been born in the woeful plane, may these merits help them be born in the blissful plane. And also may these merits help them all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Also take a moment to be grateful and thankful to all those who have taken the trouble, who have made the strenuous efforts to organize these sermons and who continue to do so, by sending out invitations, by organizing and sending out messages to everyone, to you, and also by making these facilities available, this hall, as well as the furniture that you use, as well as things such as this microphone, and perhaps even by offering you a glass of water when you're here for your well-being, for your comfort. So all of them go through so much to make this happen. And that is all for your own good, for your own betterment, to help you attain Nibbana. So may the merits that we have all acquired today help them as well, help each and every one of them who dedicated their time, who dedicated their earnings, or perhaps even dedicated their offerings, or perhaps even dedicated their well-wishes to this cause. May they all rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today, and may those merits help them all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may the merits that we have all acquired today in listening to this sermon, in preaching this sermon, help us all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana, as well as may these merits help each and every one of us who are striving, who are working hard, day and night, relentlessly, with fighting endurance to become Arahatun Wahanses, and may these merits help us to be able to witness, for all of us to be able to witness the advent of many hundreds and thousands of Arahatun Wahanses on this blessed land itself very soon. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may these merits that we have all acquired today help us all attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana in this very birth itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May the Noble Triple Gem bless you all.